Hello, and welcome to Book Circle. I'm Earl Wyenberg. This time we will continue our reading of Village Diary by Miss Reed. I had wasted a morning in Caxley trying to buy a lightweight coat for the summer. As I was roaming round the coat department at Williams, which styles itself Caxley's leading store, followed by an assistant staggering under an armful of coats already rejected by me, I bumped into Amy. "You look a wreck," she said, truthfully but unkindly. "I am a wreck," I replied simply, and went on to tell her of my hopeless quest. "My dear, we are of the race of lost women," said Amy dramatically. The wilting assistant stopped to listen to any more interesting disclosures. "Clothes there are, beautiful clothes, magnificent clothes, inspired clothes, for those with 36 or even 38-inch hips. For the 44 inches and over, there is a good range of comfortable garments, obviously designed by kind-hearted men who take pity on large problem women. But for us, dear, for you and me, for you with your 42 hip measurement," she gave me no time to brook protest that I was only 40, Amy in full spate books no interruption, "and for me," she continued, "with my 40, well, 39 really, but I prefer to be comfortable, what do we get?" She waved a hand at the departing assistant who was returning a dozen or so coats to their showcases. "Nothing," I ventured. "Nothing," agreed Amy emphatically. Suddenly, her eye became fixed intently on my red frock that Mrs. Moffat had made me. "Turn around," she commanded. "Huh! A zip right down to the waist, eh? That accounts for the fit. And that panel over the midriff is cut on the cross, I see. Who made it?" I told her that Mrs. Moffat designed and made it. Amy continued to prowl round me, occasionally peering more closely at a particularly interesting seam. She even started to undo the zip to see how the back was faced, until I protested. "She's a marvel," announced Amy at length. Now, Amy knows about clothes, and is an expert needlewoman, as well as an astute buyer of really beautiful garments. "Do you think she'd make for me?" she asked. I said that I would ask her. I had to go for a fitting in the afternoon for 2 cotton frocks that she was making. "But I'm having them buttoned down the front," I told Amy. "You can't believe how difficult it is for a woman living alone to cope with the zip down the back." "What you want," said Amy, "is a husband." And without pausing to take breath, added, "How's Mr. Maughan?" I suggested a trifle tartly that coffee might restore both of us to our senses, and the question remained unanswered. I had been invited to stay to tea at Mrs. Moffat's bungalow after my fittings. I found Mrs. Finch Edwards, as handsome and exuberant as when she had taken charge at the infants' room over a year ago, sitting in the trim little drawing room while her baby daughter kicked fat legs on the rug at her feet. She was an adorable baby, chubby and good-tempered, and Mrs. Finch Edwards had had her christened Aletha. "And she sleeps right through the night," said Mrs. Finch Edwards assured us. "Hubby and I don't hear one squeak from 6 till 6 the next morning." "You just don't know how lucky you are," Mrs. Moffat answered as she poured the tea. "Now, Linda," and the conversation became a duet compounded of such phrases as gripe water, dreadful dummies, picking up, lying on the right side, kapok pillows, down pillows, no pillows, until it was enough to turn an old maid silly. Mrs. Moffat said that she would be delighted to make dresses for Amy, and I explained that as she now lived at Bent, just the other side of Caxley, and drove her own car, she could come whenever it was convenient for Mrs. Moffat to have her. Mrs. Finch Edwards and Mrs. Moffat, I know, have high hopes of opening a shop one day, showing dresses that they have designed and made. In time, they hope to have a substantial business with a workroom of first-class sewing girls, while they attend to the designing and organization. They should make a success of such a venture, I feel sure, for they are both energetic, ambitious, and particularly gifted at this type of work. "I've made several children's frocks for that new shop in Caxley," Mrs. Finch Edwards told me, "but of course I can't do much while Aletha's so young, but just wait." "Just wait," echoed Mrs. Moffat, and their eyes sparkled as she met the equally enthusiastic glances of her friend across the teacups. The Caxley Chronicle today published a short article of mine about Lenten customs in Fairacre and other neighboring parishes. This is my first appearance in the paper, and I must say it all looked very much more impressive in neat newsprint than it did in pencil in a half-filled spelling book from school. The vicar began this project by showing me accounts in parish magazines of the last century, and Mrs. Willett also told me of many interesting things that her father and mother did during Lent. The reaction to my appearance in print has been most amusing, and Mrs. Pringle addressed me with something like awe this morning. To be in the papers at all is something. To be in the paper is everything in Fairacre. Less welcome were such comments as, A, "It's a real gift," the vicar. B, "I suppose it just flows out," Mrs. Willett. C, "If it's in you, I suppose it's bound to come out," Mr. Willett rather morosely. D, "Wonderful, dear, and so effortless," Amy on the telephone. As I had spent 6 evenings at the dining room table, sitting on a hard chair with my toes twisted round its legs, chewing my pencil to shreds, and groaning in much the same anguish as had my class when they composed their recent deathless verse, I found all these comments particularly souring. On thinking over Mr. Willett's gloomy comment, I have come to the conclusion that he looks upon any kind of artistic urge as a sort of poison in the system, which is better out than in. Perhaps this theory is more widely held than we realize, I thought to myself as I knitted busily up the front of a cardigan this evening, in which case matters became very profound. Instead of praising and envying artists, perhaps we should be sorry for them, victims as they are of their own pains. Is all art involuntary? Is it perhaps a bad rather than a good thing? I paused to study the front of my cardigan and found that I had decreased at both armhole and front edge, giving a remarkably bizarre effect to the garment and involving 2 inches of careful unpicking. I decided suddenly that literary fame had gone to my head, that the obscurer motives behind artistic impulses were beyond my comprehension, that a glass of hot milk would be a really good thing, and bed the best place for a bemused teacher. April. In a week's time, Fairacre School will have broken up for the Easter holidays. I, for one, am always glad to see the end of this most miserable of terms. In it, we endure each year the worst weather, the darkest days, the poorest health, and the lowest spirits. But now, with Easter in sight and the sun gaining daily in strength, the outlook is much more heartening. The return of the flowers and young greenery is a perennial miracle and wonder. The children have brought treasures from hedge, garden, and spinney, and coltsfoot and crocus, violet and viburnum, primrose and pansy deck our classroom, all breathing out a faint but heady perfume of springtime. How lucky country children are in these natural delights that lie ready to their hand. Every season and every plant offers changing joys. As they meander along the lane that leads to our school, all kinds of natural toys present themselves for their diversion. The seed pods of stitchwort hang ready for delightful popping between thumb and finger, and later the bladder campion offers a larger, if less crisp, globe to burst. In the autumn, acorns, beechnuts, and conkers bedizen their path, and with all the manifold possibilities for fun. In the summer, there is an assortment of honeys to be sucked from bindweed flowers, held fragile and fragrant to hungry lips, and the tiny funnels of honeysuckle and clover blossom to taste. Outside the post office grow 3 fine lime trees, murmurous with bees on summer afternoons, and these supply wide, soft young leaves in May, which the children spread over their opened mouths and, inhaling sharply, burst with a pleasant, satisfying explosion. At about the same time of year, the young hawthorn leaves are found good to eat, bread and cheese, some call them, while the crisp, sweet stalks of primroses form another delicacy, and the added delight of the thread-like inner stalk which pulls out from the hairier outer sheath. Summertime brings flower games, the making of daisy chains, poppy dolls with little Chinese heads and red satin skirts made from turned-back petals. He loves me, he don't, counted solemnly as the daisy petal flutters down, and bunny's mouth, made by pressing the sides of the yellow toadflax flowers which scramble over our chalky Fairacre banks. And always, whichever season, there is a flat ribbon of grass to be found which, when held between thumbs and blown upon, can emit the most hideous and ear-splitting screech, calculated to fray the nerves of any grown-up and warm the heart of any child within earshot. How fortunate, too, are country children in that, among all this richness, so much appeals not only to their senses of taste and smell, but also to that most neglected one, the sense of touch. As they handle these living and beautiful things, they run the gamut of texture from the sweet chestnut's bristly seed pod to the glutinous, smooth coldness of the bluebell's satin stalk. They part the fine, dry grass to probe delicately with their fingers for the thread-like stalks of early white violets, and yet to pluck the strong, ribbed stems of the cow parsley, they must exert all the strength of wrist and hand before its hollow tube snaps with a rank and aromatic dying breath. They leap to grasp the gray, rough branch of the beech tree that challenges their strength near the school gate, and, legs writhing, they feel the old, rough, living texture of that noble tree in the very palms of their hands. Alas for their brothers in town, who respond to the same challenge from a high brick wall. At its best, it can but offer a dead, stony surface, filthy with industrial grime, and at its worst, the cruel shock and horror of vicious, broken bottles. For the most part, country children say little of the joys that surround them. They are, rather naturally, taken for granted, and in the case of the boys, they think it would be vaguely effete to comment on flowers and plants. The girls are less monosyllable and chatter interestedly about their latest finds. They enjoy finding the earliest violets, particularly a pinkish one that grows not far from the beetle and wedge, and it is they who bring most of the contributions to the nature table. Their sense of touch is more sensitive and affords them greater satisfaction. And I remember Sylvia Burton's bunch of wildflowers, presented proudly one morning with the comment, "They's all got square stalks, miss, I've felt 'em." Sure enough, they had. It was a most satisfactory bouquet formed by members of the natural order Labiata. The vicar called in to give his weekly call. This time, as well as a little discourse on everyday Christianity, he told the children about Palm Sunday and the Easter festival, as is his wont before the school breaks up for the Easter holiday. When he asked for Pussy Willow to decorate the church, Joseph Coggs raised an eager if grimy paw. "I can get a whole lot," he said, eyes agleam. "If I wiggles through the hedge down the bottom of Miss Parr's place, there's a pond and a pussy willow tree." The vicar looked slightly taken aback. "But I'm afraid that's a private tree, Joseph," answered the vicar. "It belongs to the people who live in the flats there." Joseph looked bewildered. "But they never picks it," he assured the vicar, "and they'd never see me get in." The vicar drew a sad breath and very kindly and patiently gave a little extra homily about the sanctity of other people's property, and the promptings of one's own conscience, and the eye of the Almighty which is upon us all, even those who are but 6 years old, and are wiggling on their stomachs through the long Fairacre grass. It was nicely put, and Joseph appeared to understand the vicar's words, but it was quite apparent to me that the principles behind the little homily were at war with the words of Joseph's feckless father, whose favorite maxims are "findin's keepin'" and "what the eye don't see," etc., principles which, unconsciously, Joseph has imbibed. There is no doubt that innocent children from such a slack and neglected home as Joseph's need more positive guidance in right behavior, frequently and firmly, if they are not to slide willy-nilly into the clutches of evil companions, and so drift into the ranks of criminals. This evening, the meeting of the Women's Institute was held to hear more about the forthcoming pageant. We had had a heavy shower after tea, and the approach of the village hall, which stands not far from Mrs. Moffat's spruce new bungalow, was very muddy. Someone's tractor had made deep squelchy ruts which were full of rainwater, and the women clucked their tongues with disgust as they tried to wipe their shoes free of mud on the grass at the side of the door. Loudest in her protestations was Mrs. Pringle. "No need for all this muck," she boomed as she arched an elephantine ankle and poked mud from her instep with a stick. "Time this place was built so you could buy a load of good gravel for a few shillings, but it's never done. Now look at it. A pity poor old Sir Edmund's passed on. He'd have put down a good path for us." "I suggest we all put a shilling toward a load of gravel," I said. Mrs. Pringle snorted and turned on me a glance so hostile that it was a wonder I did not fall withered at her feet. In the hall were about 40 women, many of them with toddlers and young babies. "My husband said fat chance he'd have getting down to the beetle if he had the children to look after, so I brought 'em too." "Ah," agreed her neighbor comfortably, "the men don't like the kids around. 'Tis only natural, I suppose." This charitable remark was endorsed by other women around who, in the kindest and most indulgent tones, recounted various incidences of male selfishness which made me feel very glad that, as a single woman, I was not called upon to endure such affronts to common justice. "Oh, mine's very good," said another. "He never minded me coming up here this evening. I'll have a sit and look at the paper," says he, "as nice as you like, and you can wash the dishes when you come back if you're a bit late. Oh, he's easy." The murmuring grew in the hall as the latecomers arrived. The usual flicking of switches went on as someone tried to find the best method of lighting the hall with the fewest bulbs remaining that worked. The hall was erected about 30 years ago and is a useful but ugly building of corrugated iron painted a dark red, which has over the years faded to a depressing maroon. The roof is also made of iron, and in very hot weather the building becomes stiflingly hot. If it rains heavily, the noise of the water drumming on the roof can successfully drown any speaker. If it is cold, the place is sketchily heated by means of 4 oil stoves, which frequently smoke and decorate the room and its occupants with black floating smuts, which play havoc with clothes and complexions. The lavatory, of the bucket variety, is housed at some distance from the building in a bower of elder trees and is a constant annoyance to our Mr. Willett, as he is frequently asked to look after it. Actually, Arthur Coggs is supposed to do it, but more often than not he forgets his duties. As he is away all day in Caxley working as a builder's laborer, and Mr. Willett is on the spot here in Fairacre, it so happens that the urgent and outraged cries for help are answered by our school caretaker. The hall itself is a fairly large building, with its inside walls lined with the sticky, ginger-colored matchboarding so beloved by our forebears. The First Fairacre Scout Troop, comprising about 15 boys, holds its meetings here, and on one wall hang diagrams showing how to tie knots, a copy of Scout rules, a chart showing birds and their eggs, and various other fascinating documents. A little further along, hanging somewhat askew, are several photographs of past football teams. There is not one smile among the many grim countenances here displayed, but the biceps, forced up by judicious folding of the arms, are a wonder to behold. The manly forms of some 30 or 40 years ago appear to have been much more corpulent than those of today, but perhaps there were more staunch and bulky garments underneath the red and white striped Fairacre jerseys then. On the door, thoughtfully placed, is a small white card on which is printed in uneven capitals, "Have you switched of the light?" The missing F, of for off, tweaks at my school mistress's sensibilities so severely that I itch to be alone in the hall one day when I shall give myself the exquisite satisfaction of adding the F. As it is, with possibly the perpetrator himself, or at least his sisters, his cousins, and his aunts all about me, I can do nothing unless I am prepared to face a hornet's nest of buzzing family umbrage. On the platform sat Mrs. Partridge, our president, with Mrs. Pratt, once Mrs. Annet's landlady, beside her as secretary. The ink-stained deal table was covered with a magnificent cream linen cloth embroidered by members of the Institute. After each meeting, it is folded into a clean piece of sheeting and borne away to Mrs. Pratt's house and put safely into the first drawer of her sideboard until it is time for it to see the light of day again. Mrs. Pringle views this cloth with something of a low churchman's disapproval of the high churchman's elaborate ceremony. "Made an idol of that there cloth," she once told me. "I said at the time it was too fanciful and would show the dirt. What's more, I offered my mother's best tablecloth that she used year in, year out in her front parlor for as long as I could remember. As fine a piece of red chenille with a good deep fringe to it as ever you see in a day's march. Might faded, maybe, but there's no call for making personal remarks about my mother's care of it. Mondays and Thursdays I was hung on the line and brushed lightly with an old clothes brush dipped in cold tea. Come up beautiful, but no, 'twasn't good enough for the W.I., so this fal-lal had to be made instead." Mrs. Pringle bridled at the memory of this rebuff to her offer, and I attempted to comfort her. "Never mind, you must be glad you've still got it at home." Of course I'd put my foot in it again. "In a foolish moment," began Mrs. Pringle heavily, "and believing that the girl would treasure it, I let that Minnie Pringle over at Springborn have it for a Christmas present." She paused, drew in a long and sibilant breath, and thrust her face within 2 inches of mine. "And you know what? A fortnight later, as sure as I stand there, and may I be struck down if I don't tell the truth of it, I saw that very same cloth on her aunt's table up the road. Called there one day, I did, to give her my club money, and there was my tablecloth on her table. 'Where'd you get that, pray?' I asked her, civil, mark you, but cool. 'Our men gave it me,' she said. 'Why,' I told her, 'do you know what?' She just laughed. Just laughed. I was proper wild, I can tell you. Never said nothing more to her, of course. Wouldn't demean myself. But when I next saw that Minnie Pringle, I gave her the rough side of my tongue, the hussy." At last Mrs. Partridge rose behind the tablecloth, which had caused Mrs. Pringle so much heartburning, and the meeting began. The minutes were read, approved, signed, and as nothing arose from them, Mrs. Partridge came straight to the point and told us the latest news about the pageant. "The draw has been made," she told us, "and it is Fairacre's privilege to open the pageant. Ours is the first scene." A gratified murmur arose from the hall, and proud smiles were exchanged. Mrs. Partridge, astute in the handling of these affairs, allowed us to bask in this glory for a few happy seconds before releasing the cold shower. "It is a wonderful thing, of course," she proceeded, smiling expansively, "and we are very lucky to get this scene. It also means that our part will be over first, and we can relax and enjoy the rest of the pageant. So less tiring for the children, too." "I just ain't gonna be in it," said an audible but obstinate toddler to his mother at this juncture. Mrs. Partridge continued without batting an eyelid. "And now you'll want to know the title of Fairacre's scene." Mrs. Moffat caught my eye across the room and mouthed the word "Wimples" at me. I smiled back. "It is The Coming of the Romans," went on Mrs. Partridge. "Romans?" said the members in one outraged breath. If they had been called upon to be earwigs, they could not have sounded more affronted. Mrs. Partridge gathered us up again. "The Roman soldier's costume will be most effective, of course. A lot can be done with gilt paint and a good stout cardboard." After the first shock of losing wimples, pearls in plaited hair, ruffs, buckled shoes, and other flattering accoutrements, the meeting came round to the idea of even earlier times and their sartorial possibilities. Seizing her opportunity, Mrs. Partridge continued glibly. "The scene opens with the native people of this country, ancient Britons then, busy about their everyday work, the men shaping flints for tools, dragging logs back for the fire, and so on, and the women nursing their babies and cooking over an open fire. After a time there are sounds of distant voices and marching, and one of the ancient Britons runs into the camp pointing dramatically into the distance. A Roman cohort approaches, the natives flee terrified but gradually creep back. The Romans give them small gifts, and we see that the regime of Roman rulers and British vassals will soon be set up." Mrs. Partridge paused at the end of this swift resume of our forthcoming task, and there was an ominous silence. At last Mrs. Pringle broke it in a voice heavy with foreboding. "Madam President," she began, becoming suddenly a stickler for etiquette, And fellow members, does this mean that some of us here have to be ancient Britons? Before her relentless gaze, even Mrs. Partridge quailed a trifle. But naturally, Mrs. Pringle, she replied, doing her best to answer with easy grace. Some will be ancient Britons and others Romans. Huh, snorted Mrs. Pringle. And what, may I ask, if anything, I mean, do ancient Britons wear? It was an anxious moment. You could have run a satisfactory heating system with the electricity generated in the hall at that quivering instant. Mrs. Partridge, with the knowledge of past crises overcome and the rarefied blood of a vicar's wife beating in her veins, rose gamely to the challenge. We shall wear, she said steadily, furs, probably mounted on old sacks. There was a gasp from Mrs. Moffat. And our hair, she continued remorselessly, will be as rough and dirty as we can make it. Mrs. Pringle sat down with a jolt that made her companions on the bench shudder in sympathy. For once, she was speechless. Mrs. Partridge pressed home her attack. And our feet, she said with a hint of triumph, will be bare. There were faint sounds of dismay among the ranks before her, and the shuffling of feet clad, at the moment, in comfortable if muddy footwear. At this despondent moment, when dissension might so easily have reared its ugly head and wrecked our future revels, Mrs. Moffat, a comparative newcomer to Fairacre, rose to her feet. Very pretty, very smart, an incomparable dressmaker, and not much of a mixer as yet, she is still looked upon with a slightly suspicious eye by the old guard in the village. I don't know whether you want volunteers for the ancient Britons, she said, pink with her own temerity, but if you do, I'd like to be one of them. It was a courageous statement, and made at a most strategic moment of the campaign. Moreover, it was a particularly noble one, when one considers that Mrs. Moffat well knew that her own good looks would be hidden under sacks and old fur bits, which in themselves must be anathema to her sensitive, clothes-loving soul. This unselfish gesture did not go unnoticed. There were sounds of approval and one or two encouraging nods. Come to think of it, said another woman slowly, I don't mind being an ancient Briton myself. I got a nice bit of old hearthrug. Mrs. Partridge clinched the matter by saying, I'm looking forward to being one myself. For one thing, the costume will be so easy to contrive. Then, with consummate generalship, she drew her ranks of broken women together at this precise moment, which she realized would be the most propitious that she could hope for in these adverse conditions. And we will follow gallant Mrs. Partridge further into the plans for the festival next time.